Chapter 2, Iron and Stone. Shane stepped off the transport bus into a wall of heat so thick it felt like stepping into an oven. Kansas summer didn't play around. The air was still, heavy with the scent of hot asphalt, sweat, and something faintly metallic, like old blood and rust. The gates of the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth loomed ahead, taller than they had any right to be, crowned with razor wire that gleamed under the midday sun. Thick stone walls, old as hell but solid as ever, wrapped around the facility like a fortress. The place wasn't just a prison, it was a goddamn relic. The castle, they called it. Behind him, the other prisoners shuffled off the bus, the chains on their ankles clinking softly like wind chimes from hell. Nobody talked. The heat sucked the words right out of the air, and besides, what was there to say? Everyone here had already lost. Shane squared his shoulders, keeping his posture straight. They could strip him of his rank, his uniform, his name. Hell, they already had. But they weren't getting his spine. A group of guards in crisp khaki uniforms stood waiting, hands on their belts, eyes sharp. They weren't like the MPs he was used to. These men weren't part of his world anymore. They were here to make sure he understood that. Move. The order was barked, short and clipped. Shane walked. Processing took hours. First, they took his name, gave him a number, 45287. That was him now. Just 5 digits sewn onto a jumpsuit. Then came the paperwork, fingerprints, the medical exam. He stood still as they photographed him, front, side, back, like an animal being cataloged. When they handed him his new uniform, it was stiff, uncomfortable, faded brown, like everything else in this place. He pulled it on, the fabric rough against his skin, nothing like the crisp military fatigues he had once taken pride in. He caught his reflection in a scratched-up mirror as they buzzed his hair down to regulation length. The sight made his stomach tighten. The beard he'd been forced to shave off, the empty stare in his own eyes. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. They weren't just locking him up. They were erasing him. By the time they led him out onto the main yard, the sun was beginning to sink behind the stone walls, casting long shadows across the compound. The place was massive, concrete buildings stacked like lifeless gray tombstones. The yard itself was a stretch of hard-packed dirt, ringed by high fences and guard towers. No grass, no trees, just heat and dust and the quiet hum of a prison running like a well-oiled machine. The first thing he noticed was how orderly everything was. This wasn't some civilian pen filled with junkies and gangbangers stabbing each other over cigarettes. This was military. Everyone walked in formation, no talking out of turn, no slouching. Every move had purpose, drilled into them by the same institution that had trained them to be soldiers in the first place. And now they were prisoners. He followed the guard through the main corridor, the heavy steel doors clanking shut behind them. The air inside smelled like sweat and disinfectant, the same institutional stink he had known in every barracks he'd ever slept in. He passed row after row of identical cells, men standing at attention for evening count, back straight, eyes forward. Some glanced at him, sizing him up. Others didn't bother. Everyone here had seen fresh meat before. Finally, they stopped in front of his new home, Cell 14, Block C. The door slid open with a metallic groan. "In," the guard ordered. Shane stepped inside. The cell was a tight fit, 8 feet long, 6 feet wide. Just enough space for a cot, a metal toilet, and a tiny desk bolted to the wall. No privacy, no comforts. He had seen smaller rooms in forward operating bases overseas, but at least there he could step outside without a leash. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound final. He was in. Day 1 hit like a boot to the ribs. 0430 wake up. Military discipline never died in a place like this. When the lights flicked on, Shane was already sitting up, boots laced, back straight. Old habits. Mess hall was silent. No talking, no laughing. Just trays slamming down, metal spoons scraping against cheap food. The eggs were rubber, the toast was cold, but he ate without complaint. Work detail followed, laundry duty, scrubbing uniforms for men who used to wear real ones. The irony wasn't lost on him. Lunch, count, more work, more silence. And then came yard time. That's where things got interesting. Shane had spent years in military units where a man's reputation was everything. Here, same rules applied, just different stakes. The first lesson came fast. He was leaning against the fence, soaking in the Kansas heat, when a voice cut through the air. "You're the one that shot that kid, right?" Shane turned. The guy staring at him was big, built like a linebacker, arms covered in faded ink from his old unit. His face was lined, eyes full of something unreadable. Not hostility, not yet. Shane met his gaze, steady. "What's it to you?" The man smirked, taking a slow step forward. "Just wondering how a soldier ends up a murderer." There it was, the challenge, the test. A dozen eyes locked on them from across the yard, some waiting to see if Shane would fold, some waiting to see if there'd be blood. Shane's eyes widened, but he kept his voice calm. "You ever clear a room, Marine?" The guy's expression didn't change. "Yeah." "You ever hesitate?" Silence. Shane took a step closer, just enough for his words to land heavy. "Neither did I." The man studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Not approval, not friendship, just understanding. The tension bled away, and the moment passed. Nevertheless, weeks turned into months. Prison life settled into a brutal, mind-numbing rhythm. At 04:30, Shane sat on the edge of his cot, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the gray concrete floor of his cell. The air inside was thick, stale, heavy with the faint stench of sweat and disinfectant. The place never felt clean, no matter how many times the guards made them scrub it down. The walls, cold and unyielding, had long absorbed the weight of shattered dreams and dead ambitions. A hard clang echoed through the corridor, someone shutting a steel door too hard. Somewhere down the block, an argument flared up, voices sharp and ragged, followed by the bark of a guard telling them to shut the hell up. Shane barely blinked. Around 0500, they let the animals out. The yard was already boiling under the Kansas summer sun, heat waves shimmering off the concrete. The smell of dust and hot metal hung in the air, mixing with the sweat of men who had long given up on anything resembling dignity. They lined up in rows, heads forward, shoulders squared. Some still carried themselves like soldiers, backs straight, trying to hold on to something of their past. Others had given up completely, slouched shoulders, dead eyes, men who had surrendered to the machine. Shane stood in the middle, silent. Roll call. Names became numbers, men became statistics. They moved through the motions, marching to the chow hall, eating in silence, keeping their heads down. Some of the lifers talked, the ones who had been here long enough to carve out a place. They ran gambling rings, traded contraband, held their own strange kind of power. Shane ignored them. He ignored everything. Half an hour later was when the worms needed feeding. Shane sat at a corner table away from the clusters of men who had formed their own groups. Some stuck together by branch. Former Army with Army, Marines with Marines. Others grouped up by race or gangs. Shane stayed alone. He ate quietly, plastic fork scraping against the cheap plastic tray. The food was the same every day, some kind of pale, rubbery meat, watery vegetables, bread that felt like eating a sponge. It didn't matter. He wasn't here to enjoy anything. From the next table over, he could hear some of the other guys talking. "Another goddamn class?" One of them snorted. "You really think that's gonna get you out of here any faster?" "Gotta do something," another said. "Ain't gonna rot in here like the rest of you." A third one chuckled. "Hate to break it to you, man, but we all rotten. just at different speeds. Shane tuned them out. Programs, therapy, reintegration courses, they pushed all that hard here. Some guys went to classes, worked prison jobs, tried to rebuild something. The ones with shorter sentences played along, hoping for good behavior points. The ones in for life just did whatever they had to do to keep their heads above water. Around 1745, the sun dipped lower, but the heat still clung to the concrete. Shane stood near the edge of the yard, arms crossed, watching the basketball game in the center. The usual players were out, big guys, loud guys, the ones who had something to prove. A fight had nearly broken out earlier, but it fizzled out when the guards shot a warning glare from the towers above. Shane never spoke, simply stood in a corner and stared at the concrete. When it was finally 2000, the lights went out. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. The nights were worse. During the day, he could keep moving, keep his focus on the routines. But at night, when the cell block went quiet, when the guards did their rounds and the only sound was the occasional snore or the rustling of a restless body, that's when the memories came creeping back. He could still feel the weight of the trigger against his finger. He shut his eyes, but the images were waiting for him. Some guys talked about regrets, about choices, about how they wished they'd done things differently. Shane didn't wish that. He knew he had done what he was trained to do. He had followed orders. He had protected his men. So why the hell was he in here? The anger boiled up tight in his chest, but it had nowhere to go. It never did. He let out a slow breath and turned onto his side, facing the wall. Nothing new ever happened. No phone calls, no letters. His parents had stopped visiting after the first month. He'd refused to engage with them. His mother's tears were too much to bear. His father's silence worse. The world outside kept moving. His old unit was still out there, still training, still deploying. His name was forgotten, buried beneath newer headlines, newer scandals. Here, inside these walls, Shane had no future, no past, just now. And now was a stone box lined with iron. Some days the anger burned so hot he felt like it might consume him. Other days he felt nothing at all. That was the dangerous part. Because when you stop feeling, you stop fighting. And once you stop fighting, you're just another number in the system, one with 5 digits to be exact. The smell hit first, gunpowder, burnt flesh, wet earth. It was the kind of stench that burrowed into a man's skin, clung to his clothes, made a home in his lungs. It was always damp here. Even when the sun broke through the low-hanging clouds, it felt like the mud swallowed the light whole. Shane moved fast, his boots sinking into the ruined ground with every step. The air cracked with gunfire, sharp, unforgiving. A familiar chorus. He barely registered it anymore. Ahead, a collapsed shack smoldered, its roof a charred skeleton. The smoke curled thick into the air, blending with the cold mist that hung over the valley. Movement. To his right, 30 meters out, just past a row of rusted-out cars, someone darted between the wreckage, too fast for him to get a clean ID. Civilian, combatant. He didn't have the luxury of hesitation. He raised his rifle. "Soldier, hold fire!" Sergeant Laughlin's voice cut through the chaos. "It's a kid." The words barely had time to register before Shane saw him. Thin, ragged, covered in soot. A boy, maybe 10, clutching something against his chest, eyes wild. He looked right at Shane, lips moving, but the noise swallowed the words whole. Shane's finger was already tightening on the trigger. Then he saw it, the cord running up the boy's sleeve, the weight of something beneath his tattered jacket. A vest. The kid took a step forward. Shane fired. A flash of light, a deafening roar. The world shattered. Shane blinked. The echoes of the explosion faded into the low murmur of prison noise. The stink of Bosnia, smoke, blood, damp rot, was gone, replaced by the sterile chemical bite of the USDB. His fingers dug into the rough fabric of his prison-issued pants, his knuckles white. He exhaled slowly, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. Same dream, same memory, always the same ending. Outside his cell, boots scuffed against the concrete floor. A guard. 45287. Shane didn't move. They didn't call him by name anymore. He wasn't Specialist Alexander. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a person, just another goddamn number. The guard rapped a knuckle against the bars. "You got a visitor." Shane frowned. His parents had stopped coming months ago. There was no one left. "Not family," the guard added as if reading his mind. "Some civilian lawyer, Michael Chisholm." Shane didn't answer. He just stared at the wall, scowling. A lawyer. What the hell did a lawyer want with him? The guard shifted, clearly impatient. "You want to see him or not?" Shane closed his eyes. Bosnia was still there, waiting for him. Every time he shut his eyes, every time he let his mind drift, he was back in that valley. Back in the mud, back in the smoke, back in the moment where it all unraveled. But now, for the first time in a long time, someone was offering him something. A chance. A reason to care. He let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll see him."